Hey everybody, Jake here, and you're watching this video because a gamer in your life is forcing you to watch the Game Awards on December 7th, and you need to know what the heck is going on. Now, it doesn't matter if you don't know a Fortnite from a Dead by Daylight, an Xbox from a GameCube, or a Sonic from a Sonic. All that matters now is that you kick your feet up, relax, and join me as I tell you everything you need to know about the nominees, the history of the Game Awards, so that you can be part of the conversation. Let's dive in. To understand the Game Awards' brief history, it is important to know that from 2002 to 2013, the Game Awards were known as the Spike Video Game Awards because they were hosted on the network television channel Spike TV. The legacy here, it's regarded as being a bit cringe and confused about who exactly the audience was, who gamers were as people.
You can also watch us on Twitch and Steam, which coincidentally I've nicknamed my genitals.
So these awards largely took place in an era where gamers were still defined by hyperviolence and Doritos. So insane stuff took place on stage, like Neil Patrick Harris performing a musical number that capped off with a mass shooting to absolutely zero applause.
Can we get this cleaned up? I got a show to host.
It's the 2010 Video Game Awards.
That's gaming, baby. But in 2014, Spike TV dropped the Game Awards, and show producer Jeff Keighley would go on to resurrect it under his own banner. To this day, Keighley is the master of ceremonies representing the show and seems to be the main creative force behind it. The Game Awards of the modern era is, I'm gonna say, like a classier affair. It features special presenters, musical guests, and is all around red carpet adjacent in vibe. The current incarnation of the show clearly wants to legitimize gaming in a way and divorce it from that dude bro aesthetic of the past. Now, one of the most beloved aspects of the show is the Game Awards Symphony Orchestra, which belts out recognizable hits from the past year in gaming. It is legitimately very cool, but definitely emblematic of the kind of highfalutin show Keighley is chasing. But all of this stuff about the show is really only half of the formula, because the other half of the Game Awards...
World premiere.
Wait, that's not right. There we go. The Game Awards pulls in a massive audience, and that's due in large part to how prominent exclusive reveals for upcoming titles are. It's not uncommon for games to get announced with a trailer at the show, and many people watch hoping for some surprise reveals. Unlike other awards show, a large amount of public reception to the Game Awards, how good people think the show is based on the quality of those reveals. Keighley knows this, and it can, at times, make the show feel a little commercial.
Pass to the front of the stage. Great work, Hydrobot. Can I... Ow.
Now, before we get into the actual video game nominees, I want to touch on how they are decided upon. Games released throughout the year are nominated by a jury consisting of over 100 enthusiasts and press outlets around the world. What this amounts to is basically a bunch of websites trying to distill the tastes of their entire editorial staff into a single ballot consisting of their top 5 choices in each category. Now, the 5 games that appear on the most of these ballots are then submitted as nominees. The winners are then selected by a combination of that same voting jury representing 90% of the vote and public fan voting representing 10%. At the end of the day, this system can be criticized for having an unspecified voice and set of values, oftentimes appearing more like a popularity contest because the jury is so big and there's no way for members to really talk or campaign to one another. But it's also fine that it's a popularity contest, and other shows do exist in the gaming space to fill more specific niches. Okay, so hello again, person watching this. You're doing great. We're having fun. Now it's time to get into the actual nominees. Now, the way the awards are structured, I think it's helpful to start with the Game of the Year nominees because things kind of fall down from there. So let's go through each of the games nominated for Game of the Year. I'll tell you what you need to know about them and how you can be part of the conversation surrounding these awards. I want to start with Baldur's Gate 3. This is a fantasy RPG that bases almost all of its mechanics around the tabletop game Dungeons & Dragons. Classically known as computer RPGs, these titles rarely break through the zeitgeist like Baldur's Gate 3 was able to do this year. Typically, and you will see this among the other nominees, third-person action games are the star of gaming discourse and Game of the Year awards. These types of games have historically lent themselves to serious character-focused narratives that gamers get attached to. But Baldur's Gate 3 shines because it feels like a complex and thought-out narrative with voice acting and killer cinematics, but rather than a defined protagonist, the player has a ton of control over pretty much every step of the story. You're talking, you're making decisions, you're deciding who to fight, where to go, and this creativity extends to other elements of the game like the combat. There's simply not a lot of other games like this, and the ones that are don't have this level of depth and polish. It's the closest thing gamers have ever had to the improvisational nature of Dungeons & Dragons, and for these reasons and more, it's definitely the favorite to win Game of the Year. Oh, also, you can have sex with a bear, and people loved that. Our next nominee is Alan Wake 2. This is a survival horror game about a writer trapped in, I'm gonna call it an alternate dimension, and I think this is a dark horse pick for Game of the Year. In my personal opinion, Alan Wake 2 tries to be different, interesting, bold, and weird more than it really tries to be like a good video game. Most reviews kind of agree that the mechanics and the gameplay are like serviceable, but the game's unconventional methods of storytelling are the real attraction. It's a game with a lot of concepts and metaphors, and probably more than anything else, a real author's fingerprint that makes it feel like art rather than like a video game consumer product, which is fairly unusual in this space. Our next nominee is Spider-Man 2, and I kind of get the impression that nobody wants this to win. It's easy to see Spider-Man 2 as the opposite of Alan Wake 2. It's a big honkin' Marvel IP. It has all the bells and whistles of modern open-world AAA games. It feels incredibly good on the sticks, but to many, it is a sequel that succeeds in largely the same ways that the original game did in 2018. So no matter how good it is, it's not bold or exciting enough to be named the Game of the Year, you know? But if you ask me, I think Spider-Man 2 has a lot going for it under the hood. It's a game that really values diversity and inclusion. It takes the web-swinging mechanic from the first game, which was viewed by many as perfect, and somehow made it better and more interesting. And most importantly for me, it's a game that weaves its narrative beats and emotional moments with transcendent gameplay mechanics. So when a character has a revelation, it's made more memorable with a new power or ability so that both the character and the player feel similarly transformed. It's good stuff. But yeah, I don't think it's gonna win. The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo's biggest release of the year. This is a sequel to a game that many consider one of the best video games of all time. Like Spider-Man, it may be criticized for borrowing too heavily from the original game, but Tears of the Kingdom introduces truly mind-boggling physics systems that are easy to use and experiment with. It's not the most graphically intense game on this list, but so much of the appreciation for this title comes down to what players can, with a little creativity, build on their own. And that ability to create vehicles and other tools around an intuitive physics system is incredibly impressive in its own way, and it definitely makes Zelda stand out as a Game of the Year contender that isn't as focused on one specific narrative experience. It's the ultimate sandbox, and it's definitely the biggest threat to Baldur's Gate 3 at the awards. Next up is Resident Evil 4 Remake. The action horror game follows a guy named Leon on a mission to rescue the president's daughter from a serious zombie-ish situation. The original version of this game came out in 2005, and it's often cited as one of the best video games of all time. The remake updates the title to modern standards and adds a bunch of new ideas to appeal to the current gaming landscape. But it's interesting, the original game is so beloved, it might feel like a betrayal for Resident Evil 4 Remake to not make the list. It is arguably as class now as it was then, but while it does live up to an incredibly high standard, the game doesn't really set the bar for the genre the way it did back in 2005. It's a great game, but not really a contender for this year's award, if you ask me. And finally, we have Super Mario Bros. Wonder. This is a 2D platformer starring everyone's favorite Italian plumber. The main hook of the game is that in every level, you find a Wonder Flower that mixes up the gameplay and transforms your understanding of what you have to do to proceed. It is consistently super fun, and I'm sure you've noticed that this is the most immediately, bright and joyful game on the list. I don't think it's really a contender for the GOTY, but it's representative of a type of game that puts fun first, and at that, fun for the whole family and a wide variety of players. The conversation surrounding this game, it's largely that it's a huge step up from the 2D Mario games of the past decade, which have all more or less looked and played the same. The enhanced production on display here, combined with a revitalized love for Mario as perpetuated by this year's release of the Super Mario Bros. Movie, does give this game a little bit of juice going into the awards season. Now, of course, we can't cover every nominee and award, but I want to leave you with some out-of-context, off-the-cuff remarks that you can drop that will assure any gamer that you know what you're talking about. You know, I bet Hideo Kojima will reveal something. Him and Jeff Keighley seem pretty close. The Player's Choice Award is definitely going to Genshin Impact. Sorry, gamers. Dave the Diver, I thought this was the best indie game category. The only presence that Nintendo is gonna have at this thing is Reggie Fils-Aimé. Now, if you ever see this guy on screen, say, better be ready with that censor button. Every year is a good year if you're a Sonic fan. Okay, now if you say that and the people in the room don't react positively, quickly switch and instead say, rough year for the real Sonic fans though, am I right? You just never really know with Sonic fans. And with that, I think you're ready to watch the Game Awards with some real bona fide gamers, and they won't even know that you got all your intel from me. Thank you everybody for tuning in, and when in doubt, remember to cheer for the words world premiere and just get mad at random stuff like real gamers do. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.